and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 278. Today is a feedback session, so yes, people have sent in their images and we're going to look at them and see if we can work out ways of improving them on some level or another. So that's what it's about. If you're watching live, leave a comment in the comments part and we can make a start. So yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Episode 278 is a feedback session. So we've had 5 people send their images through to the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres podcast, and we're going to be looking at them, they're all different photos, all got different kind of thoughts, concepts, ideas, potential behind them. So yeah, quite a mixed bag today. There's no one single theme that runs through the whole thing. So yeah, that's going to be fun. So like I say, if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. If you're not watching live, but you are watching the recorded part, you can still leave a comment in the, I suppose the comment section down below underneath here. Also, if you are happening to watch live, then click a like as well as leaving the comment, because I do get the feeling occasionally we get people who seem to sort of turn up live as we're going, because YouTube will put us into a little section in some people's feeds saying, oh look, there's something live going on right now. But I think it does require a couple of people to like this first of all, so that it tells the algorithms that we're worth watching. So if you could do that, that would be great. Well, I can see we've got a couple of comments in already. Where are we? No, sorry, not that one. Let's just remove. No, still not that one. Yes, no, we were right. That's right. Okay, sorry. Different screens going on here. Where are we? So April says, greetings all from a cloudy Pennsylvania. Oh, that's a different place. Oh, I'm on the road, she says. We'll have to check this out later. Thank you in advance for the feedback, Kim. Okay, well, that's April. We'll in fact be dealing with April's picture first. So if she gets a chance to pull over, maybe she can watch it. Otherwise, can check back later on the recorded version. Lisa joins us from a thawing Maryland. So not under however many feet of snow. That's good. John says, good day from mid-Ohio, warmer but rainy. It's one of the problems when it gets warmer from snow. Sandra says, hi everyone from a dark and rainy day in Birmingham in the UK. Susan says, hi from an improving day in Kirkcudbright. Heavy rain this morning, but a glimpse of the sun and 8 degrees Celsius. Oh, 8? Is it up to 8 already? Yeah, it was really miserable around here. Kirkcudbright is just down the road from here, so quite often we have the similar kind of weather pattern, though not always, considering she's only 9 miles away. Plus, of course, probably 8 degrees there is probably only 6 or 7 here in Castle Douglas. We're just a little bit higher up the hill. And Janet joins us from a relatively mild Kingston, Ontario, going up to -2 degrees C today. Well, -2 is positively balmy out in Ontario in Canada, I think, especially in the middle of February. Right, okay, so we have people, we have topics. What we also need is a rearranged desktop here so that I can move things around the screen and see what's going on. So today then is a feedback session, and feedback is critique on your photos is by far and away one of the best ways to improve your photography. Interestingly, quick little aside, I was given the opportunity to judge a whole pile of photos recently, and as I was looking at them and I was going through them, and it was for a camera club. Not your one, Susan. Don't worry. But as I was looking through them, I thought there was a lot of what I thought were very basic mistakes made for photos that have been submitted. You know, whether it's things like straight horizon or even like the main subject being in focus. And I suddenly started thinking, well, actually, I kind of expected something better from a camera club, but then I've not been in a camera club. I've given talks to many camera clubs, but I've never actually been in one. And I thought, how much tuition do you actually really get? And this is a problem for practice, and it doesn't matter whether it's a camera club or it's just an enthusiastic individual who decides that they fancy doing a bit more with the photography. How much tuition do you generally get? And we don't. What happens is we take photos and we kind of hope for the best. There's nobody ever telling us, that is that bit that needs to be in focus, not that bit. It's that bit in the background which is grabbing your attention, not this bit. And Without that kind of feedback, how do you know? How do you know what you're doing wrong? How do you know that when you took a photo of this, that there's something over there grabbing all the attention, which is detracting? And unless you, I mean, even if you go to art college and learn photography, you don't tend to be taught these things. You'll be taught how to hold the camera, what ISO is, maybe what shutter speed and aperture, but we're still not taught all these ideas of composition, of lighting, of focus, of narrative, which is all the stuff I talk about on these podcasts. And so actually getting that direct feedback on your own photos is really rare, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And so here we are, this podcast, and this podcast is really designed primarily to give you feedback on your photos. It's just very few of you ever send me any stuff, so I end up doing it once a month. But to be honest, I'd be happy doing this every week if you sent me in enough images. Because I genuinely believe it's where we learn the most, is when somebody turns around and just points these things out to us. Very often, afterwards we go, oh, well, that was kind of obvious, but it wasn't obvious until we knew. It's a bit like the car keys might have been on the table the whole time, but until somebody said they were on the table, we'd hunted high and low and never been able to find them. Back to this idea of feedback. I still believe it's the most important way to improve your photography. Fine, we'll do all these other things. I'll talk to you about texture. I'll talk to you about low light. I'll talk to you about diagonals and backlight and all this kind of stuff. And all these things are useful, but you can understand them kind of loosely as the concept of them, but how does it apply to your own actual particular photo? And it's extraordinarily important to get that kind of feedback. So make the most of this. I will point things out to you. I'm never brutal about it. I'm not nasty about it. And my desire is for you to improve your understanding of photography. Name's in the title. Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and send them to Kim Ayres at kimayespodcast@gmail.com. This is what this podcast is all about. So this is what we're talking about. A couple of comments here. What have we got? Oh, Susan says, absolutely no tuition, but we're hoping to change that. Oh, okay, that would be good then. We've got a Gunilla Jansson 6640. Hello from Ireland. Ireland? I don't know how to pronounce that. But welcome. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce which bit of your name and also the bit you're from. It's looking Scandinavian, but I'm afraid my geography and my linguistics is really bad. But welcome, I'm really glad that you could turn up. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? So we have here, like I said, we've got 5 people sent in images, and we're going to start with April. So if I do that, and I do that, and I do that, then hopefully you should now be able to see this picture that April sent in. Our new visitor says, between Sweden and Finland. Aha! Well, at least I was in the right corner of the world. Welcome. And what would be a good name to tell you, to call you rather? Is it Gunilla? Junilla? If you give me any clues, I will do my best to try and remember. Meanwhile, okay, so this photo then from April. Now, if you remember when I was talking about, we did the texture challenge. Ultimately, I thought this was a great one from April. I praised it highly because it's that notion of finding something interesting right in front of you. That sometimes we can get caught up with the idea that photography should be all about big landscapes or intense action and what have you, but sometimes these little details right under our nose can be really fun. Now, one of the things I said to April about this one was, great, but now we're aware that my head, I think, is probably in front of the key bit that is slightly the problem, which is this bright patch of milk over here in the right is just kind of drawing a little bit too much attention to one side, out of the picture. And I suggested the idea of darkening it down. Now, April said, hi Kim, for the next feedback session, could you please use the serial picture I used for the texture challenge to fix that super light area in the upper right? I would like to see how you do it. So what we will do then is open this up in Photoshop. Double click that. And okay, so now we've got the picture. Now, essentially, there's a number of different ways you can do this. But what I would suggest now, and kind of a little bit depends on what you kind of want to do. I mean, there are ways where what you can do is if we Marilyn's joined us as well and says hello from a sunny Colorado. Welcome, Marilyn. Glad you could join us. So now what you can do on a very kind of basic level, if we take a kind of a little selection tool here, actually, sorry, that's the remove tool. We take the selection tool and I could select the dark area, the pale area that we're wanting to get rid of, or darken down a bit and do something like that. So I've selected an area there, and then I could go to, if I wanted, generative fill and type in more muesli and see what happens. And remember, the thing is with generative fill is that the resolution isn't that high, but on a picture this size and something that might only ever be used on the internet, you can certainly get away with it. Now, what's it done? So that's kind of interesting, giving us 3 different options here. That one, that one, that one. That one's still quite milky. That one's darker. That one's a bit milkier. So you could go for that. And instantly, when we've got this, we can see that it's taken away some of that brighter patch, which is grabbing all the attention. And it draws our attention back to the spoon and the raisin sitting on it. So if I was to copy all that onto a new layer, what we could do is something like, if we then go into camera raw filter, we could give a little bit of a vignette, darken down the corners to draw our attention into the middle, and possibly we could contrast it a little bit, or maybe even, no, not that one, effects, add a little touch of clarity, something like that, maybe slightly overcooking it. And, so we've managed to move from that, not that one, from that, where we've got the white patch in the corner grabbing our attention, to that. And now our attention gets drawn much more back to the spoon and the raisin and the idea of what's being dug out of the bowl rather than what's behind the spoon. Now, that's the quick thing if you're wanting to use a generative fill. Now, not everybody has generative fill. Not everybody's comfortable with using the idea of generative fill. So the other option here is good old clone tool. Now, if I take the clone tool over here, I can start copying other bits of muesli or cereal into the background. But we do have a slight problem in the fact that there's a limited amount of space here, which is of the same level of blur as such. So if I take something like this bit here and then start painting it in here, it just looks absolutely wrong, because this front bit here is in fact much sharper, as well as being slightly darker, and it just doesn't look right. It really does look like it has been pasted on. If I want to take a bit from over here, there's not a lot, there's a little patches over here. So what I might do is, I'm going to do this in a couple of little stages. I'm going to take this little, what do you call it, the kind of patch tool kind of thing, and I'm just going to run over that little bright patch there, see what it does. Okay, that's good. That's kind of getting rid of a couple. So that's giving me a little bit more out of focus muesli, if you like. Now what I can do is I could take this and I could start pasting it in here, but again, it's a bit dark. Also got to be careful where you run to the edge. You can see that sharp line there. So the suggestion here is the thing to do. If you drop this down to say 50%, give or take. Right, now, if I take this and start running, you see it starts to sort of blend in just a little bit more without feeling like it's completely dominating. And then I can just sort of catch other bits and just kind of repeat. So I've gone too far over there to ended up hitting that line, that edge line. But so I just kind of grab little bits from over here and then just, but at 50%, it's allowing it to sort of feel quite soft and not dominating and over, creating an overkill with the with the paste. So do you see this then? So now what we've got is we've gone from that to that. And it's now dark enough to have taken the attention away from the milk, but it's not so detailed at the front or immediately noticing that you're copying another area. So now if we were to take that and repeat that same little effect with, using a little bit of vignette and clarity, we've now got this. And that, again, if we compare that to the original, feels like it's just what we're really doing here, April, is the idea of we're removing all the attention that's being grabbed by this light patch. And to come back to one of the things we don't get taught in photography is that there's the area we're trying to draw our attention to, which in this case is where, at the point where the spoon is digging into the cereal, and primarily, I suppose, this raisin here and the bits around it. But because we've got the bright patch of the milk, that's what's drawing our attention. So once we get rid of that bright patch, whether that is through generative fill or good old copy and paste, then it stops, our attention isn't drawn to it. Nobody's really going to, unless we've done it quite badly, nobody's going to be looking at it going, oh, that doesn't quite fit right. And that's the whole thing about editing, is your editing. Good editing needs to be invisible. If people are noticing the editing, you've lost, because they're now no longer involved in the picture. They're too busy looking at what the editing is doing. So I hope that all makes sense, April. Thanks very much for sending that in. And it's a good photo, and just taking away that little bit where it's kind of grabbing the attention, I think just allows it to be much more the photo you intended it to be. Right, okay, so, Meg's joined us as well, says hello everyone. We're glad you could make it along, Meg. And for anybody who wants to wish her a quick happy birthday, it was Meg's birthday yesterday, by the way. Marcy's joined us as well, says good morning, Kim, good morning, y'all. Glad you could make it, Marcy, welcome back. Okay, so our next photo then, the next thing I'm going to move on to, oh, right, hold on, that wasn't that one. I'm going to move on to Nicola. So now Nicola said, sent in this one, and Nicola has gone full abstract. And she says, I attach a photo I took by accident and noticed I quite like the in-camera effect that appeared. And she says, I've edited it a bit, but I feel like I've overcooked it. Now, basically, so this is her edited version, and this is the unedited version. This is the original. So she took this photo. So what we've got then is we've got a fern by the look of it. And, we've got a kind of more autumnal fern against the green. And then she's taken it, edited it. And in her editing process, she says, I used content aware in Photoshop to make it wider. I flipped the image, duplicated layers, rotated it to give it a bit more interest. So what Nicola has done is she's taken this idea of she started off with that intentional or in-camera movement where, so you've got now, whether it's ICM, she said, which is now in-camera movement or intentional camera movement. I suppose it's intentional. So if it's intentional, it means she was deliberately kind of making a movement at a slower shutter speed in order to create that kind of blurred smoothing out. And then she's gone in and she's stretched it out, slid the sliders, done overlay. And the thing about Nicola is, for those of you who don't know, is Nicola's past life as well. She's a graphic designer. She actually ran a graphic design company for quite some years. So Nicola, you'll very often find with a lot of Nicola's pictures that there's a kind of graphic design element of it. Now, what we end up here, the tricky thing is what Nicola says is, I'm still not sure if there's something salvageable in this. Keen to hear your thoughts. Basically coming out of this idea, has she overcooked it? And the problem we have here is it kind of depends on what you're intending. Now, at this point, it's colourful, striking, lots of lines, curves, movements. It's gone beyond the natural. Okay, these colours are not natural colours. They're not. We don't look at it and go, oh well, yes, these ferns are usually this bright red and yellow, and that kind of really, or getting to almost acid orange in places, and the thick, deep purples. So we are into the realms of abstract. We're into the realms of graphic design, of creating something that starts off with a photo in nature and then moves into something sort of semi-abstract art. We can still recognize that it's got fern shapes, it's got those organic shapes, but it's not now attempting to be a pretty picture of a fern. It is an abstract art version of a fern. And this makes it particularly difficult to critique as such, because a lot depends on what it is you are after. So some of you know that my wife is an artist, and she goes full abstract, is completely non-representational. So abstract expressionism, she's creating shapes, lines, colour, form, and she's moving the paint and the texture around the board until it goes ooh for her, until it feels right, until she is, as she sometimes says, it's like scratching her bones. She's just got to get it just in the right place. But it is an intensely personal thing, because it's an expression of something that feels right on the inside. Now, there's always this difference when you're coming, if you're taking a picture of a photo, photos operate in a slightly different realm. Now, you can still do all this, and we do still do all this. We do still all have this sense of, well, this does it for me. This is where I'm trying to get it to. But that varies from person to person. What one person is chasing, somebody else isn't necessarily chasing. And when you're kind of moving the bits around the screen like this and finding the colour and moving, whether it's working or not tends to be down to, is it making you go, ooh? If you feel it's overcooked, then it's overcooked. If you don't feel it's been cooked enough, then it's not been cooked enough. If you feel the colours are too strong or the colours are not right, in a way, with this one, Nicola, what you have to do is you have to keep playing until either you get it right or you go, this wasn't the right photo, I'm not getting what I want, and abandon it and go for something else. So it is particularly tricky to be able to, for me to turn around and say, I mean, I can turn around and say, I like it or I don't like it, or the reds are too strong or the greens are too pale, or whatever it is. But that doesn't matter, because somebody else will come along and say, well, they think the purples are too saturated, or somebody else will say, but their purples aren't saturated enough. All you're going to get at this point is different people's opinions, because what you're doing here is you are chasing something, and you are chasing a very particular unique vision, which isn't necessarily going to translate, because we have moved that little bit too far into the abstract in terms of photography and critique. So I don't know whether that's really helping much, Nicola. Suffice it to say, what really, I suppose, what it comes down to is, on something like this, it ultimately has to be, is it what you're chasing? If the colours are too strong for you, then you have to pare them back a bit. If the colours are not strong enough, or the texture's not strong enough, then you have to increase it. So, yeah. I hope that kind of makes sense there, Nicola. I think the more you move into the abstract, the more difficult it is to create. I mean, I can talk about, well, the lines work or whatever, but the whole point of the critique section is to try and get beyond the just, I like it, I don't like it, but why do I like it, or why don't I like it, and what could we do to improve it? But something like this is such a personal taste that it's very difficult for me to then be able to say to you, well, if you do this, you will like it that little bit more, because in a way, you've just got to keep moving the sliders until you're happy with it. So I hope that gives you some, even if it hasn't told you exactly what to do, to fix the picture as such, hopefully it's given you a better framework within which to operate how you set about playing with that picture. But thanks very much for sending that one in, Nicola. Okay, comments here. Several people saying happy birthday to Meg for her yesterday. Sandra says, lovely soft focus on the photo. Lisa says, I really like this. Certs743, just stopping in to say hi from Winnipeg, Canada. Okay, Certs743, is that somebody we already know? Are you new here? If you're new, welcome. If you're one of the regulars but you're using a different handle, then let us know. Give us a name. But welcome. Marcy says, oh, she's in Winnipeg too. And Colorado. Marilyn says, this is lovely abstract, Nicola. Okay, right. Next one we're going to move on to then is Janet. Now, let me close that and find Janet's photo. So Janet sent in this one. It says, I have attached an image for critique. So I'll just zoom in a little bit here. It is an image of one of the ice fishing nets on Lake Erie last weekend. I was trying to show the ice and the tent together, but not really sure that it worked. I did try another version with the ice more prominent, but in that version, the tent was hardly noticeable. So she showed me the other version of this. So here we've got lovely shape of the ice, but the tent in the background is so small and out of focus. It's not clear what it is. Now I've said that it's a tent for doing ice fishing on, we go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. But had we not said that, it wouldn't necessarily been obvious what it was we were looking at. So we go back to Janet's picture here, and she says, I wanted to make the photo look nice and cold and wintry, but I'm not sure that it does. This was the first time Lake Erie has been 95% frozen since 1996, according to new reports I've seen. Okay. So what we've got here then is we've got the tent out on the ice, out on Lake Erie. But Janet's not totally sure that it's really doing kind of what it really wants to. And I think ultimately what we've got here is about a sense of context, okay, a sense of giving it space to breathe as such. And in a way, I think if we look at your other version here, where there's much more ice, but the tent is too small, and then we've got this one where we've got the tent, but maybe there's not enough ice to give us full context. I think then that that's really where we want to be thinking about it. What essentially is a sort of somewhere in between. And this is one of the things I've sort of mentioned before with photography is very often we're either too close or we're not close enough. We tend to sort of very often, when we're uncertain, we'll fall for a middle ground. We'll go for, when actually, if we zoomed in and really went, this is where the story is, that would be fine. Or we zoom out and we give it context and we say, this is where the story is. And so what I want to do here to show you what I mean with this is if we open this in Photoshop, and what I'm going to do, I'll just use, I'm going to expand it. Now I'll just use content aware fill. We're not using any, well, it still is AI, I suppose. But, and where are we? Let's just zoom out a little bit. So what we've got here is we've got your picture, but if let's just expand it a little bit and see what that does. What is it? So, April saying happy birthday to Meg at Cracker Barrel now. My favourite restaurant New York does not have. Okay. Oh, Nicola's just joined us. Says, sorry, Nicola, you've just missed me talking about your photo. Okay, you could, at the end of the podcast, you can go back and watch it again. So where was I? Okay, meanwhile, with Janet here. So you can see we've gone from that to this. And already I start to feel, okay, this is giving us a little bit more context. Let's take this a little bit more. Tell you what, let's take this up and let's kind of go a little bit rule of thirds-ish, right? So that the tent is now not quite so far over to the edge. And we'll see what that does. Okay, now I think we're sort of starting to get somewhere. We're starting to get a bigger sense of that tent right out there on the ice. Now, obviously, if you were taking a photo, the ice patterns would be different. The content aware thing is creating repetitive patterns. But what we're trying to do really is just get a better sense of what it would be like had you stood back a bit. Now we're into the full kind of rule of thirds. So we've got the tent sitting on that crossed line here, and then we've got the horizon on the line there. And now you see this. I think this is now really giving us a sense of the tent on the ice and that sense of the vast landscape. Now we have to be careful here because there comes a point. Where are we? sorry, undo that, where we overdo it. So if I start stretching this out further, something like that, see what we get. Okay, we're now, the tent is we're starting to lose some of the tent. And then if I stretch it out even further, what happens is we end up with this vast landscape, but now we've got the tent on it. Now we're kind of starting to move back into the realm that we had with your other photo, which is there's a tent on it, but yeah, kind of, you know, it's sort of too big. So if we go back again, and when we go back to this, and I think you look at something like this, and we're kind of more around the optimal. You know, you can go this, you can go a little bit bigger, a little bit further maybe, but you don't really want to stretch it much beyond about this. But when you've got this kind of level, I think, then what you're talking about is you've got the sense of, you've got the tent, you've got the ice, we've got these lovely lumps of ice in the foreground, but you've got that sense of the expanse in a way that if you look at your original one, the tent is there and it's dominant, but the expanse and the relationship between the tent and the expanse, and that's ultimately what it's all about, is it's this relationship. And where do you find the balance? And to a certain extent, you just kind of have to take several photos at different levels of zoom. You know, you zoom right in on the tent and then take several back, take a couple of steps back, do a wide angle, and then ultimately see what works. Something like this, tent on the ice, is all about the balance. How much tent, how much ice? What are we trying to create? We're going to try and get a sense of that human part into that wide expanse in nature. And when you can find that balance, you'll kind of get a better feel for it, and you'll tend to find that the whole photo works a little bit better. So I hope that makes sense, Janet. But thank you for sending that one in. That was really interesting. More comments. What have we got? Okay, Marcy says, can your fancy software lower the perspective? Well, you can kind of tilt things a bit if you want in Photoshop, but basically if you're taking the photo and you want a lower perspective, just squat down is the other thing. But having said that, I mean, there's different levels here where actually it's an interesting point, Marcy. Let's go back to here for a moment, because one of the things I do quite like about what Janet has done here with the tent is that the tent just breaks the horizon line. Okay, now if Janet was to have squatted down and actually gone literally to kind of ground level, then this tent would have appeared on the horizon, but then you would have only had between here and the tent as the foreground, and I don't think you would have got quite such a sense of expanse. So you need a bit of height in order to get that sense of the fact that that horizon is a long way away. But at the same time, if she'd sort of gone too high and this tent had appeared inside the underneath the horizon line, I don't think that would have worked quite so well either. So ultimately, I do like the fact that Janet has got the tent just breaking that horizon line. I think that kind of helps with the balance as such. But it's a good thought though. It's always worth taking these ideas and trying them out. And just as I said, like she should be zooming in and zooming back and out and all the rest of it, absolutely try these different things. Squat down, stand on tiptoe, raise the camera right above your head, put it down on ground level. Explore, experiment, because ultimately then that way you're going to get the best, you will find the best version of the photo that's going to work, which is most going to capture what it is that's grabbing your eye in that moment. So yeah, interesting idea there, Marcy. What else have we got? Oh, we've got a Flavio Souza 925. Greetings from Portugal. Welcome, Flavio. Subbed a few days ago. Loving the approach and channel with lots to see and learn. Thanks for sharing. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you could join us live. It's always I mean, if yeah, loads of, well, 277 other episodes to go and crawl through if you want, but I think the live version is kind of what it's about, because it's the chatty, the kind of quick how-to videos that are out there, which kind of condense everything down into 2 minutes, are great if you want a quick how-to. This is much more about exploring the conversation, the chat, the kind of being in the room with as such, as we're exploring the ideas. But yeah, so glad you could make it along. Thank you. Marcy says, I only use Lightroom. Well, again, yeah, it's whatever you are using, that's okay. Lightroom's got a huge amount of things it can do. It's playing with the editing. We try and get as much in camera as we possibly can, because the more we get in camera, the more options we have for editing. Sometimes if we get most of it in camera, then we don't need to do a lot of editing. And so there's always a balance somewhere along the line. But this is why when I say, actually, if you're in a situation like Janet was, you don't take one photo, you take 20 photos, you take 100 photos or whatever, you move around, you try these different things. And then when you get back to your computer, you can look through them, pick out the one that just makes you go, ooh, and say, okay, now I've got most of what I want here. What can I do in the editing process to enhance that narrative? Do I need to crop it in a bit? Do I need to change the crop ratio of it? Do I need to lighten this bit, darken that bit, remove that bit? Where do I need to draw the eye to? And everything is about the narrative. Everything about it is about what is it you're trying to tell. And in the case of Janet's picture, it's that juxtaposition between this sort of vast ice landscape and that tent, which is just so unnatural. That polythene tent sitting in the, in the middle of the ice. That little human bit of interaction against the vast landscape. And once you go, okay, well, that's what the narrative is. Now we need to make sure that the ratio, the balance between the tent and the landscape, that's what we're looking for. So now the editing is going to concentrate on that. If the shot was a different kind of shot, we'd use a different editing technique to enhance that particular narrative instead. Okay, Janet says, I shot from ground level. If I shot from ground level, the tent would be behind the ice. And yes, and there's another thing of what happens to be in the way as well. Marcy says, I like the composition, Janet. I just would have gone a little lower, just me there. And that's it. And until you're there, you're not entirely sure what's available to you as well. Sometimes, there is a lump of ice right here, and maybe, some of this ice here, although there's a tent on it, there are patches of water too. You might be kind of a bit, I'm not sure how close I want to get, how much I trust the ice, or even how waterproof my boots are. So, yeah. But that's okay. And the fact that one of you may have gone slightly lower than the other is perfect, is brilliant. And that's what photography is. We all have a different eye. We all have a different thing that makes us go, ooh. And that's what makes but if you chase that, if you explore that, if you make sure you kind of commit, you allow yourself to go, this is what makes me feel good, then you start to develop your voice. And it's why your photo will look slightly different to somebody else's photo, even if you were standing in exactly the same place, under exactly the same conditions, with exactly the same cameras. You will end up with a different photo, because what appeals to you will be slightly different from what appeals to the person next to you. And that's part of what I love about photography. As Sandra says, I liked both shots. Okay, excellent. Right, so next then, let's just have a quick breather and remind you that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, and would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Now, also, a little reminder as well that if you want to get some critique or feedback on your own photos, then there's a number of ways you can do it. The best way is to email your photo to me, kimayrespodcast@gmail.com. I set up this email address specifically to receive images for feedback and for submission to challenges as well. Now, if you are sending me in a photo for critique or feedback, then if you can send me your edited version, but send me an unedited version as well. High resolution JPEG, or if you have the raw file tends to make life a bit easier as well. Because sometimes when it comes to editing, there are things you can do with the raw file that you can't do with a JPEG. And so it allows me to offer you up alternative options as to how you might have set about editing that photo. Now, the other thing, quick update on the Smug Points leaderboard. So for those of you who haven't been watching this before, we have a Smug Points system going. So basically, if you contribute to the podcast, you get a certain amount of Smug Points. So everybody who's sent in an image for critique gets 25 Smug Points. Everybody who's left a comment, just leave a comment while we're going out live, you get 5 Smug Points. If we have a challenge and you send in something for the challenge, you get 10 Smug Points. Then at the end of the challenge, usually like next week, we have a low light challenge. I'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. You get, we'll then have a kind of a judge's favourite and a crowd favourite, and you get extra Smug points for that. The person who accumulates the most Smug points at the end of the month generally gets to choose the topic of choice and the challenge for the following month. Now, January and February, or when we got to the end of January, it was a rollover. We had a tie between April and Marilyn. Plus, we also had the fact that Sandra was really needing some information on low light photography before all the light festivals finish as the winter comes to an end. So this month has been about low light. Last week I talked all about low light photography, giving ideas, and I've set a challenge for low light photography challenge for next week. Currently sitting where the Smug points lie is April and Marilyn are both still joint here at 80 Smug points each. Nicola's on 70 and VG's on 60. However, that will all change when we get, because everybody who sent one in today gets 25 Smug points. So I think, well, Nicola has, Marilyn hasn't, so that will nudge Nicola more into the lead. But then it will depend on how it pans out in next week's challenge as well. So still everything to play for, right? Okay, Smug points aside, let's carry on with this. And so next one we're going to go to then is John. So John in Ohio sent in this picture, and he apologised for the fact that he's only got this really small version. He's been hunting high and low for the larger version, can't seem to find it at the moment. So I'll just zoom in a bit. It gives you enough of an idea to see what's going on. And John says, hello Kim, I took this shot a few years back, and in fact actually I can see there's a John Harvey 2009 back there, so 17 years ago. But he says, at a reenactment fair, they were walking towards me and I quickly lifted my camera to grab a shot. I thought they were interesting in the outfits they chose. I've entered this into several photo crowd competitions, but it rarely scores well. Please have a go at it. Okay, so what's interesting here? So this is a grabbed in the moment shot. This isn't a planned shot. This isn't the kind of shot where you have a chance to sort of take 20 or 100 different shots, changing your height, zooming in, zooming out. It's an opportunist. So John was at a reenactment fair, period costumes, people walking about. He sees a couple of women, grabs the camera, click, 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 manages to maybe shoot off 2 or 3 or something, decides that this is the one that he wants, and then has put this into photo crowds and other online competitions. But it's never given him, for all the fact that when John saw this, he thought, oh, that's interesting, that his sense of interest doesn't seem to have translated to the people who are looking at it and then voting on it. So it's never been a photo crowd winner, or maybe it's not appeared in the top 10% or 25% or wherever else it is. It's never quite got the level of interest from anybody else that John has in it himself. So that's an interesting one. Now, sometimes these things are because of the way you've edited it or bits and pieces here. Now, there's a limit to what I can do because John couldn't find the original in time for this. I'm not able to take the original and say, well, okay, we could have cropped it here, we could have lightened or darkened this bit. But what I think we can talk about here is the kind of conceptual idea or certain parts of it. And one of the things here is there's the notion of how we feel about a photo at the point we take it, and then how that translates to somebody else who wasn't there at the time feels when they look at the photo. Now, when we take the photo, we're in amongst the atmosphere. Okay, so we're at this historical reenactment place. There's people walking around in costume, there's noises, there's sounds, there's stalls, there's people playing, there's reenactments going on, there's all sorts of a buzz. Looks like the weather was nice too. So along with what you're seeing visually, there's what you're hearing, there's what you're smelling, there's what you're feeling. There's all these other senses that are going on. When you take the photo, there is only the photo. We've lost all the other senses. All we've got is that visual bit of snapshot. So how does that translate when somebody else is looking at it? And specifically, when you're talking about the notion of photo crowd, I'm going on to that, is how does it work in competition situations? And at this point, what we're talking about is the notion of we're needing probably something more than just the snapshot. The snapshot is two women in outfits. Okay, that's fine. But it's a record of event. There doesn't really feel like there's much happening. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. So part of this is like the notion of, say, it's interaction, right? It's not just enough for somebody to be standing there. Sometimes what you need something else. You need so if they were chatting between them, if there was something going on, if there was some kind of movement. Here you just got two people walking side by side, looking slightly lost in their own little world. There isn't like action that's grabbing us. Now, if we were to take something like, different kind of, entirely different photo, not the same place, different kind of everything, except if we take this as an example where this was taken at a music festival where some people were dressing up. So we've got people here and these women have got these big wigs on. She's got a steampunk type hat on. They're walking around with their beer. They're looking at each other and there is a look between them. Whether they've just said something, whether they've just fallen out about something, there's this interaction. You're getting a sense of something happening. And then this creates the difference between the snapshot and the narrative story. One of the things we've talked about that is a kind of recurrent theme in what we talk about with the narrative. What is the story you're trying to tell? And a good story, or not just the story you're trying to tell, but what story are you capturing? And I always think a good narrative photo has a feeling of like a before and an after. Like you feel like something else is going on. You kind of wonder, what is it they just said to each other? What is it they just heard? What is the communication? This look between them becomes important. Another alternative is where if you're talking about costume, and whether it's period costume or it's, steampunk or it's anything else, is the notion of, okay, well, where it's more portraiture. So if you take a look at something like this, for example, this one I just quickly grabbed from my files from a few years back where I was at a comic festival. And I did a whole bunch of photography for that. And here we've got this lass and she's got her samurai swords on the back and these pistols. And it's all kind of dystopian, futuristic. And what we have here is, rather than interaction with somebody else, it's interaction with the camera. Okay, so you've got this action shot with the camera. And then we're playing around with diagonal lines. We're playing, the crisscross of the tape across her chest, of the tilt of the guns, of the angles of the swords coming out, the tilt of her head, the fact that her eyes are engaged directly into the camera. So at this point now, it's about her and her interaction and her costume and everything else. So that creates a different kind of feel. The third thing here is about the notion of environment. And what we've got here is we're not really seeing much of the environment. There's a bit of a tent in the background. There's maybe a little bit of wooden shelf, but we're not really sure what that is. We're not really getting that same sense of historic period and the idea of creating a scene. And if we take something like this, where we've got steampunk. Now, obviously, a huge amount of work went into creating this photo. This is a different thing to just a quick capture. But the point is that you create a context. It's not just a case of having an outfit. It's an outfit within a context. And so these steampunk, we're then into the kind of mad professor's laboratory type thing. So when we come back to this photo then, John, what we're talking about really is, you've got it in focus. It's well lit. That's fine. You've got the technicals, but there isn't really enough story. There isn't interaction between them. There isn't interaction between them and the camera. There isn't a larger sense where we're getting a context of the period festival itself. There's not a lot in the way of composition. There's not a lot of the way of diagonals, which would create movement, or bracketing, or any of the other kind of interesting compositional techniques that might kind of push things. But so ultimately, yes, you've grabbed something, you've grabbed a picture, and it records the event. It says, yes, I was at a period place, and here's a couple of people that are in costume. But it's not a dynamic kind of photo. It's not the kind of photo which makes you go, oh, really? I wonder, look at what's going on between them. Why are they looking at the camera? What's about to happen next? What happened just before? What's going to happen just after, in that sense? So I hope that kind of makes sense. This is more of a kind of conceptual thing, that if you're putting a picture in for competition, a contest level, you need to go beyond the this is what it is into this is what it could be, this is what it implies, that it feels like there's something bigger and more going on. I mean, unless it's something like a, texture of leaves photo, in which case, find a leaf, find a good texture. But even then, you'll need to play around with the angle you take at it and the light you use. But with the texture of a leaf, you're not worrying so much about it before and afterwards. That's much more about compositional technique. Something like this, I think, is much more about that notion of action, reaction, story, dynamism, interaction, and something like that. And these are the elements that are missing. And therefore, you will tend to find the competitions that you've put this kind of photo into, if you then look at those who are in the top 10%, you'll probably find most of the ones that, even if you're talking about a contest which was specifically called period costume or historical reenactment, I can almost guarantee that the ones that will appear at the top will either be intense portraits of somebody in the costume, or they will be wider context shots with lots going on, or there will be something about some kind of form of interaction going on. So I hope that all makes sense, John. But thanks very much for sending that one in. Okay, a couple of comments here. What do we say? Marcy says the golden goblet off the elbow is great. I feel an abstract crop would work for me. Yes, I mean, that's another thing, is to go in close and find an abstract. Elisa says, what a great shot. And Flavio says, emotional photography, it can bring us back to the event where we took the photo. Harder to show that feeling to others. For me, love the close of the props, just lost on the face and expressions. Yeah, and I think Flavio's got that. That is that point that, you can find the costume or what have you, but until you get into that real sense of that emotional or sense of dynamism happening, then it's always going to feel like it's lacking a bit. Oh, John says, thanks, Kim. Brilliant. As usual, you solved my dilemma. Oh, that's excellent. So glad I have. Thank you. Thanks, John. Right. Okay. One last picture then to show, and then I'll talk about what's coming up next week. So, the last one I want to talk to is actually one of Sandra's. Now, if you remember, last week we were talking about the low light photography, and it was all sparked by Sandra, and there was a lot of information went into last week, and there was a picture that I missed out, basically running short of time. But I thought there was a little interesting editing process I wanted to show you, which I thought would work quite well. So if we flick over to here, we have this picture from Sandra's that was taken at the Canary Wharf Light Festival. And so she sent in this photo. And what I wanted to do was do a bit of kind of an editing technique. I want to show you something on this. So what's quite interesting here is we're down at Canary Wharf. We've got this situation where she's taken the photo. We've got people in the crowd. You can see them holding up their phones, taking photos. We've got these buildings up in the background, some of the lights on in yellow. And we've got what is all these mirrors, they're either mirrors or they're TV screens. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they're mirrors. So yeah, if we look at, can't see the woman who's down here somewhere, but you can see that there's a woman here with her phone and she's at a slightly different angle here. So we've got all these lights and mirrors kicking about. Now, it's an interesting kind of photo, but there are a couple of things here, Sandra, that I wanted to point out. So what I want to do is I'll just open this in Photoshop and take you through a couple of editing points that I wanted to. And the first thing is, well, actually, where that line came from, which is it doesn't quite feel right. It feels like it's tilted off to one side, and we have this problem always, which is, when there's sort of all these lines about, where do I make the horizon flat? And you may be kind of flattened out for where the heads are, but it does mean that the building in the background looks tilted. Now, everything's slightly tilted because you've got wide angle and you're tilted upwards. But the problem is this building in the back here is so dominant that the fact that that vertical isn't straight, I think kind of throws things off. So first thing I would suggest is if we take something like a guideline like this, and then we rotate and just rotate it until we straighten that line up with this. So what we're talking about roughly is something like this, if I've not gone too far over. And I'll just hit enter there. All right, I'm still on content aware fill, so that's just going to fill in the background there. It doesn't really matter. So the first thing, and I just feel straight away, I feel slightly more comfortable with the idea that that key, sorry, I'm going to stop that one. And I'll just get rid of this guideline here. That this bit of building is straight to the background. Mind you, having said that, has it gone a little bit too far? Could maybe, okay, maybe a fraction of a degree back. Doesn't matter. But first of all, I think the key thing here is make sure you're getting your verticals in the background. Now, the other thing that I wanted that came over to cross my mind with this is, you see, these blue mirrors here are really interesting. And I like them, and they're a key feature. But the brightness of that building behind is so dominant that actually your eye gets drawn to the building behind more than it gets drawn to the mirrors, these blue mirrors that are hanging down. And so what I wanted to do was kind of take you through how we could lighten these, because we have a problem that if we just kind of automatically lighten, you know, try and selectively lighten, it can kind of look a little bit false. So if I go to, now would it be, no, not the color balance, wrong one. But supposing then I, color channel mixer. Sorry, brain's gone blank. Doesn't matter. The point being is that if I selected these and just lightened them, it wouldn't quite look right. But one of the things you can do, this was already what I wanted to show you, is if I go to channels, and if you remember with the channels, you've got the red, the green, the blue. And if I select the red, then all these blue bits become really dark and black. If I go to the green, they're kind of mid-range. And if I go to the blue, look how much brighter they are. Okay, they really kind of go boom in a way. Now, the thing is, in color, it's not working that way. But when we go to just the blue channel, it's much brighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that blue channel, come back into here, and then paste it above. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the interaction between this black and white layer and the color below by going to lighten. Is it lighten? Yes, it was lighten. Or screen, it was color dodge. Yeah, hold on a sec. Yes, that was it, lighten. Yeah, okay. Now, so it's now lighter than it was, okay, except for the fact that what's happened is it's in black and white. But now what we can do, if I duplicate, go back to the original, duplicate the layer here, and then drag it above this one, then what I do is I change this level to color. And what this does is it brings the color back into it. Okay, so we've still got all the color from the blue, but we've now got the lightened part. Now, if you feel that this is still too bright and still a bit overcooked, then we just take the opacity and we can, but you can see it's a way of lightening it, but still keeping the blue within it. And then you can move your opacity slider up and down until you're kind of happy with it. And by doing that, we've managed to sort of brighten up these blue mirrors here. And so our attention gets drawn much more to it. And the dominant building at the back, while still a key part of the picture, is now no longer absolutely overwhelming our sense of the blue reflections, which was the key part of the photo. So I hope that makes sense. Go for the blue channel, lighten with the blue channel, and then use a duplicate of the original channel to bring the colour back into it. And I think you'll tend to find that that works. So that's all I really want to say about that. Hope you find that one useful, Sandra. All right. Okay, so that kind of brings us to a conclusion for what we're doing with the picture. So thank you ever so much to John, Sandra, Janet, Nicola and April for all sending in images for feedback. If you would like to send in images yourself, then send them to me at kimarespodcast@gmail.com, or don't forget, we also have a Facebook group for Upworker, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. You can join the Facebook group. You can stick images in the Facebook group. But either way, whether you're emailing them to me or putting them in the group, then tell me what your problem is, tell me what your sticking point is, and then that gives me an in as to how to best help you. Because sometimes these pictures are, sometimes the picture can be improved by editing, but sometimes it's conceptual. Sometimes, a bit like John's one was much more about the concepts, similar with Nicola's, whereas Janet's was more about expanding out the ratio, the size of tent to landscape, and Sandra's one is more about lightening up the blue area, whereas April's was more about darkening down the light patch. So there's so many different ways we can go about it, and this is where this notion of you sending in images for feedback on your photo becomes so important. This is where you really get to learn the most, is when you can get the feedback on your own photo rather than it being sort of more generalized thing on somebody else's. Oh, Sandra says, thank you, Kim. I'll have a go and see if I can replicate those adjustments. Excellent. Well, of course, the great thing is, because all these are recorded now here on YouTube, you can go back at any time, find the spot, pause, rewind, do all the bits and pieces. And if all else fails, send me an email and say, what is it you did there? I still can't quite manage to figure it out. And I can talk you through it. So where are we then? Next week. Next week then is the low light photo challenge. So last week, episode 277, go back and take a look. I spent the entire hour and a quarter, I think, no less, talking about all these different notions of low light, how to approach it in terms of your camera settings, but also how to approach it in terms of conceptually. What kind of photos are going to work best in low light? How to lean into it rather than be destroyed by it or upset with it or, limited by it. So any particular situation, there are going to be limits on it, and do you let those limits define you in a negative way, or do you use those limits and lean into it and create something positive within that set of limitations, which is of course what I'm generally suggesting. So last week, loads of detail. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. If you want to watch it again, go back and watch it again. Here we are, Kim Ayres, youtube.com/Kim Ayres. All 277 previous episodes available. So next week then is the low light challenge. Take all this information, put it to use, and create an interesting low light photo that's designed to be taken in low light, and then send it in. Send it into kimayrspodcast@gmail.com or the Facebook group. Send it to, put it in the Facebook group. Tell me about the photo. Give me a little bit of background story on it. What is it that drew you to it? Any interesting little anecdotes? Because it's not just the photos, it's the story behind the photos, which very often is really interesting and enhances and adds to our understanding of what's going on. And then what happens is next week I will go through all the photos. We'll look back and we'll look through them, and hopefully become inspired, because back to this point of when we talk about like Marcy and would have photographed that photo on the ice slightly differently than the way Janet would have. Exactly. It doesn't matter if all of you put in exactly the same kind of subject, you would all take the photo slightly differently. And when we see how somebody else would have done it, we often can find ourselves feeling inspired to go, well, okay, maybe I could go and give that a go myself and try out our own version of it as well. So that's all for next week. If you can get your photos to me by the Friday, so next week, or it's the 15th today, so it'll be the 22nd next Sunday. If you can get it to me by Friday the 20th, that certainly makes my life an awful lot easier. Saturday morning at the absolute latest. I still have to kind of work out how to, I still have to put everything together for these podcasts. I need a certain amount of time to arrange all the pictures, work out how I'm going to respond to them, that kind of thing. So yeah, the earlier you can get your image into me, the better. Right, okay, so I think that's about it. So thank you ever so much to everybody for sending in the images. Thank you to each of you for leaving comments as well and contributing to this. Welcome to the couple of new people who said hello, Flavio, and I will have to scroll back from between Sweden and Finland. And yeah, join us again next week. So look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. Cheerio.